Good evening, everyone. This is Heather with Ghost Education 101, and I am so excited for tonight's presentation. We are joined by Robert Bradley, who's going to be sharing tips and tricks on how you can use the scientific method with paranormal research. So before we get started again, thank you, Robert, for joining us tonight. I'm so excited to have you here with us.
Well, sure thing. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and can you just introduce yourself and explain to everybody what you do? Because is it CPRI?
Yes, I'm with the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation. I'm the research coordinator, and we're an organization that's it's an academic organization looking into what people consider to be, publicly considered to be paranormal in nature. So we kind of look at all different aspects from not only the spiritual side, but the like UFOs even, and cryptids, that kind of thing. And it's purely academic research. That's what we do. So.
Okay, yeah, using the scientific method has always been something I try to use because I want to try. My goal is to help make this field be more taken as a serious science versus a pseudoscience. So I'm really looking forward to the presentation you have for us today.
Well, I hope I can meet your expectations.
Okay, and whenever you're ready, we'll get started. And feel free, everybody that's watching, ask questions, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation.
All right. So should I go ahead and share my screen now?
Yep, go ahead. We'll get started.
Okay. Okay. Let's see if I can make this work. Like I said, my name is Brad Bradley. I'm the research coordinator for the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation. Today, we're going to talk about using the scientific method and experimental design in paranormal research. If you bear with me, I'm going to get rid of the hide thing here. There you go. Basically, our organization is an academic organization, and we're dedicated to the scientific study of what people might consider paranormal. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, it's not letting me, but I'll do that. Basically, let's look at the need for this kind of thing, because there's been a need for this for thousands of years. Over thousands of years, there's been continuous reports of perceived supernatural or paranormal phenomenon, and there's a documented public desire to know more about it. And there's also a spiritual need to know more about it. And basically, science offers many tools to understand the phenomena itself. Now, there are some current problems that I want to address in the field today that kind of limits our ability to do a lot of purely scientific research into the phenomena. Basically, phenomena has been sensationalized in the media. We all know it. We all see it on TV shows. It's basically it's been made out to be something that's beyond study, so to speak. It's been sensationalized that much. Also, it lacks the support of mainstream science. There are a few places that do look at the scientific aspects of research into the paranormal. One being the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies. You have the Ryan Institute. Even Johns Hopkins has started looking into that. So you have a few places that are doing it, but there is no real mainstream science support for this kind of study. And also, there's a lack of qualified personnel to conduct the research, and I want to go into that in a little bit here. Also, there's a lack of understanding of proper research and experimental techniques. There's a lack of funding, and also a lack of outlets for new scientific work. All of this stuff is considered problematic. Also, there is still, to this day, little to no sharing of data. That's a travesty. A lot of this is because of jealousy. There's a fear of rejection from a lot of organizations. They're afraid of peer review, and that's a key thing here in the scientific method, is that peer review. There's a fear of ridicule for the same thing. And most aren't using any kind of searchable database for their data. And that makes searching for data problematic. Permission to see the data is given lip service, but there is no follow through. Hardly anybody follows through with it. And the reliability and validity concerns are key here. There are no standardization, techniques. Standardization is needed. There's no standard techniques right now. Now, negligence and fraud. This is where we get a little controversial in this presentation. Many organizations were created by those with none of the skill sets needed to do the work. A lot of these organizations are committing what can be considered gross negligence through their practices. I'm going to give you a perfect example. There was a case that we were called in on that they wanted a second opinion from us. We went down to this place, interviewed the people, and found out that the fellow that was having the issues had severe head trauma and was on multiple antipsychotic medications. The group that had been there previous to us had told this very person that basically there's a demon in their house and he was getting ready to kill himself. So that right there is a perfect example of what could be considered gross negligence. And some of these organizations are committing fraud through their practices, whether they know it or not, because they go into a house and they tell the homeowner that their dead Uncle Fred's ghost is there in the corner when there is no possible way they could know that. So you got to be careful with this stuff. There's even litigation going on in several states on issues like this. And some states are looking at regulation of the field through licensing and certification because of this gross negligence or fraud that's being committed. So you have to be very careful how you do this. Now, so like I said, the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation is a nonprofit organization for the study of supernatural or paranormal phenomena. We're an academic organization. We're made up of engineers, scientists, medical professionals, police officers. We have multiple folks in multiple skill sets that we need to conduct the actual research. We use well-established mainstream data evidence collection techniques. We use the same techniques you would find in any kind of scientific research done at the university level or the college level. We use those data and evidence collection techniques. We also use well-established mainstream experimental design, analysis, and reporting processes. Those are well-defined through academia, and we use those and try to stick to those, so that way we have some kind of standard that can be compared to data that might be collected at the university level or at the college level. So now here's the process. First, you generate the hypothesis based on prior theory, reports, and patterns. You know, somebody could call you up and say, hey, this building has this apparition that's been seen, and it happens during this time of day, during this kind of environment. And so you generate a hypothesis about, you know, what could be causing that or what that might be. And so next you design an experiment to gather the appropriate data, including proper instrumentation if necessary. And I'll go into that in a little bit. Next, you obtain access to the locations to perform experiments if it's necessary to do that. You then perform the experiments and you gather the data or the evidence. You perform the data analysis, and that usually takes the most time. You need to spend, you know, it's really good to collect the data and the evidence, you know, the right way the first time. But also the data analysis after the fact needs to be done the right way. So it takes a little time to do that. You create the report and you repeat the process if necessary, because that's another key aspect of the scientific method is reproducible results. And you can use this in just about any scenario you can think of. All right. Now, when you get into the experimental design part of the process, like I said, it can be used in just about any scenario. Look at what's being reported. Let's look really hard at that. Is it audio? Is it a visual? Is it an odd feeling? Is it objects moving, that kind of stuff? So now you know that part of it. So now let's think about what data do you need to collect? Well, if it's a visual thing, you probably want to try to get video or still pictures. I prefer video because still pictures tend to have a real bad rep right now. And if it's audio, if it's audible, you collect the data via an audio recorder of some type. If it's just a bad feeling, you don't need any equipment to go in and measure for a bad feeling. You can go in and see if you are able to experience that same feeling, that kind of thing. So look at what data needs to be collected. Now, what equipment, if any, is needed to collect it? You only use what is needed. I'm here to tell you the vast majority of all of the equipment that's sold for ghost hunting is not usable in experimental design because you do not know what you're measuring. You don't know what any kind of calibration is. You don't understand the data that you're getting from it. So that equipment is not useful at all in this process. It's only good for those that are seeking a personal experience, and that's it. Now, after running the experiment, you got to think, can we reproduce this? Let's try. We're going to have to try it again and see if we can reproduce this. We do that all the time. The example I'm going to give here in a little bit is from Bacon's Castle, and we go there, a couple of times a year, and we've been doing that for 10 years. And that right there allows us to repeat experiments over and over and over again, which allowed us to come up with a really good paper on the environmental effects versus what people think they perceive, what they perceive as paranormal, whether it's visual or audible. So we actually were able to find out some things about that through this process. We ran the experiments. We knew what data we needed to collect. We found out it was reproducible. We did it over and over and over again. And we found out that during non-interactive type activity where people might hear something, let's say, over time, the data, screams that it's, all the data is reproducible. All the environmental data is completely reproducible. Temperature, barometric pressure, humidity, all that stuff is totally reproducible when that stuff happens. And because of that, it's screaming that, hey, this is a natural phenomenon. This is not spiritual. This is a natural physical phenomenon for non-interactive activity. So that right there all came about because we were able to run all these experiments that way and found out that, we're able to reproduce our results. But if it's not reproducible, do you need to tweak the experiment and try it again to see what you get? Because your experiment could fail. That happens all the time in academia. Your experiment could fail. So you need to look at your experiment. Do you want to toss it? Do you want to throw that theory out? Or did you find out some things while you were running the experiment that were detrimental to the experiment being run? So then you might need to tweak it and try it again. So that's the idea behind experimental design in the scientific method. So I talked about the example of Bacon's Castle. Our hypothesis when we went down there were that perceived manifestations are accompanied by or caused by environmental factors. And Bacon's Castle's in Surrey, Virginia, and it was built in 1665 and has continuous reports of manifestations for over 300 years. We wrote a research proposal and presented it to the location owners. And the proposal was approved and a site survey was conducted. where we actually went to the location just to see what kind of activity was there. And we found out that, you hear footsteps all the time. Sometimes there are apparitions, sometimes things move, that kind of stuff. But what we were focusing on were the non-interactive things because of the data that we were collecting. So we designed experiments based on that survey and the available equipment that we could get our hands on. Sometimes we borrowed equipment from physics laboratories or earth science laboratories, or we just happened to purchase equipment like that for ourselves. That's not cheap, so if you can borrow something, it's always better to borrow it. We established some dates for the data collection periods, and then we collected the data and the evidence and placed it in a searchable database. We were generated reports each time we went. And then we this presentation was done before the paper was submitted for peer review, but it's already there. It's up on academia.edu. And it's under, if you look for a paper by Robert Bradley about the environmental factors surrounding what people perceive as paranormal, you'll find that paper. And like I said, we did find, based on these experiments, that the non-interactive activity has very reproducible environmental data surrounding it. So we were able to conclude that this is definitely, because it's so reproducible every time, it is not spiritual. It's definitely physical, and it is almost like, people talk about place recording, stuff like that. I don't know. We have no data to support that, but we can say that this non-interactive, what people call residual activity, is definitely of a natural physical nature. Now, our initial on-site foray to determine the manifestation types and environmental factors was very successful because a lot of stuff happened while we were there. We had a chair move on us. We heard footsteps. We had a visual anomaly of somebody looking through a door at us on video. All kinds of stuff happened. We had further follow-up expeditions to collect the data regarding these various hypotheses we had. I myself was focusing on the environmental one, and the environmental factors surrounding what people perceive as paranormal. And basically, this is a continuous process. This isn't a one and done. This kind of research is intended to progress and get better over time, so to speak, almost like a fine wine. But you're supposed to continue this process and improve your data so you can improve your model. And then you can eventually draw a conclusion and find out exactly what's going on. That's what they're doing with COVID right now. Those models and all the data collection that's going on, all that data collection is improving their model as they go. So they know more about it and they change their guidelines, but based on what they're finding out. So that's what we're trying to do here too. It's the same kind of thing. Now, in doing this research, you also tend to stumble on some things. And that's why you really need to have the data analysis skill set to go in and do the actual analysis of the data you're collecting. We found that we were actually looking at the GOES satellites for environmental, like weather data, for our times at the locations that we've gone to. And we found out that the magnetometer on the GOES satellite kind of fluctuates over time, like a sine wave over time. And when we found that out, all of a sudden, it occurred to us that the vast majority of reported, perceived paranormal reports, they all happen on the downside of the curve. And on the upside, that really didn't happen at all, not hardly at all. So we were kind of taken aback by that. And there's another paper we wrote just about this very effect, This is the geomagnetic field at the nanotesla level. So this is tiny. That this magnetometer is measuring 24,000 miles out away from the Earth, but it's definitely in the magnetosphere, and it's the geomagnetic field of the Earth. So that's what we notice. So now there's that out there. So we have that paper up on academia.edu as well. Now, while we were collecting data in another location, we had the mother of all events. We happened to have all of our sensors on a location in the building where audible, audible anomalies occurred. We heard what sounded like footsteps running up those steps. We had an accelerometer there. These marks here were basically when we were setting up equipment. This is where we went running into the house after this event right here. Our accelerometer actually picked up the vibrations of somebody running up the steps because the accelerometer was sitting on the steps. The same time, we got a light spike, a light blip, so to speak, there, about maybe 10 lux, maybe 10 to 20 lux. This is where we went running into the building with our flashlights right here. But this was where we actually, at the same time we got the vibration, we actually got a light spike. Then we also got a blip in relative humidity at the same time. But notice the temperature didn't change there. But we got a relative humidity spike. And we got a blip on one axis of the magnetometer we were using right here, same time. So all those together, this actually happened away from Bacon's Castle at another location. So we actually started tweaking our experiments to look for these very things. And that helped us progress exponentially faster in our experiments towards the conclusion we were able to draw on environmental factors surrounding the perception of paranormal events. Now, in summary, there is a definite need for research into this phenomenon. There is also a need for more qualified personnel to conduct the research. There aren't enough people in the paranormal field doing this kind of research that have the skill sets to do it right. There just aren't. So that's important. I'm not saying that you can't achieve those skill sets, because it's, all you have to do is take the training to get the skill sets. But that means going to school. So, therein lies the quandary. There's also a need for proper research structures in this endeavor. In other words, standardization. Everybody's got to use the same techniques, or you cannot compare your data. You can't do it. It's like comparing apples to oranges. And there's a need for funding for this research. Everybody knows it. And I'm not talking about just fees for access or travel. That's not the funding I'm talking about. The funding I'm talking about is for database access, server access, the equipment used for the research, all that stuff, all the stuff you would normally get when you write a grant for a scientific project. That's what I'm talking about in regards to funding. And there's a need for more cooperation. There's very little of that out there. We cooperate with a couple of different groups and some other individuals because they're willing to also provide us with information, and we're willing to provide them with information. It's like a sharing kind of thing, but there isn't very much of that. Everybody wants to do their own thing because they want sadly, they want to be the next TV guy or the next YouTube person or somebody like that. So, which is not going to progress the field in any way, shape, or form. It's a short-term win for those people, and that's it. Also, eventually, there will be a meta-narrative emerging with clearer patterns and questions for us to pursue things further. The example is we're through with the experiments regarding non-interactive activity, but now we're touching our toes into the interactive side of things. And that right there has proven to be a challenge because there's only 2 data sets that we're finding that are reproducible in that kind of activity. And that would be a spike in ionizing radiation at the time of the activity, and also a spike in the intensity of the geomagnetic field on all 3 axes. Everything else is out the door. You can get spikes in temperature, dips in temperature, get the cold spots, get the hot spots, anything. Any of that stuff can happen. But the 2 reproducible things are the radiation and the magnetic field. So, and as we progress through the non-interactive activity experiments, we were able to focus our research into these areas where we found those 2 reproducible data sets. So all this stuff, like I said, is ever progressing. It's ever moving, and it's ever changing. So now there's my contact information, and if Heather wants to come back on and we can start talking to her, having a conversation about this stuff, that is perfectly fine by me. I can stop sharing my screen. You did it for me.
Yeah, I did it for you.
Excellent.
Okay, well, I'm going to start scrolling through some of the questions that we have, but some questions that I wrote down is, can you share some suggested equipment that you use to gather scientific data versus the ghost equipment you said that's usually sold?
Yeah, the stuff that's sold off the shelf is mainly is sold to make a buck. Everybody knows it, and that kind of equipment, if it would actually tell you what it's measuring, it'd be one thing, but it doesn't. Like a REM pod, what are you doing with that? You can't collect data over time, that kind of stuff. I'm not a big fan of ITC. I'm not. What we have found during those thousands or hundreds of thousands of data points from Bacon's Castle is that the activity was actually audible, even though we didn't hear it. So we thought it might have been EVP, but it was actually audible at the time because of the sheer number of recorders that picked it up. And the volume changed depending on where the recorder was sitting. So we knew it was audible. It was actually a physical thing. I would recommend that you first look at what you're trying to do. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to look at a visual anomaly? Are you trying to listen for an audible anomaly? Or do you want to see if there's high EMF in a room? Do you want to see, that kind of thing? Depending on what you want to do, then you would need to go out and get your equipment. We use, like for our radiation sensors, when we stumbled on that was pure accident. We were using Geiger counters to look for radon in basements at these sites we're going to, so we didn't die of radiation poisoning. And because that has happened to paranormal investigators. Hey, you have an idea there, Heather? I saw the light come on.
Oh, no. It was getting dark here, so I had to turn some light on so I wasn't blending in with the background.
Well, but basically, though, in doing that, we stumbled on the fact that when this activity happened in those locations, we got a spike in radiation at the 3 sigma level, which, you're talking about 3 times the background. And that's insane. The background's at 18 counts per minute. It jumps up to 72 counts per minute sometimes. So it's like, ooh, yeah, that's crazy. So, but we buy a Geiger counter that measures the stuff over time. Just like a recorder records over time, or a DVR records over time. You want to try to you don't want your equipment to be a one and done where you take one measurement and that's it. You want it to record over time so you can see what happened before and after the measurement was taken. That's basic. That's basic physical science. I'm a chemist, so that's the way I think. Like we use the GQ brand Geiger counters for radiation, And the main reason we got them was because they were the cheapest ones that would data log. So, but they work fine. So we were able to compare them with other Geiger counters, and the ratings were almost identical. So that worked out great. But that's what you need to do. Record that data over time. Find something that'll record the data over time and know exactly what you're measuring. Is it magnetic field? Is it light? Is it UV light? Is it other things like that? So that's my suggestion.
Okay. And then Claire had asked earlier, do you need a certification to go into buildings and to do an investigation? And then she followed up later on with, and how do you go about getting one if you need one?
Certification. Basically, if the location says you can go in there, then you don't need a certification. The certification, if you're going to do call it an investigation, you might need to be certified as an investigator in your state. Now that depends on the state too, because a lot of states have different rules about that kind of thing. We consider ourselves researchers, academic researchers. So when we go into a location, we're not conducting an investigation per se. We're collecting environmental data as part of an experiment. So that's the way that's what we do when we go in there. Plus, if it's a public location, like the locations we tend to go into, we're covered as volunteers in those locations under their liability insurance too. So, that's why we typically go, like we're working with a local Virginia historical group that does preservation of historical sites right now. And we go into their sites. Plus we also go into state government controlled sites, because we got asked to do that just here recently. So we're starting to do that more and more as well. So.
And then Ronnie had asked, oops, sorry, my glasses. What about SLS? Any good real data come from that?
No, I'm just going to be blunt. No. The SLS experiments that we ran, because everybody started saying, "Woo, let's do SLS." We started running those experiments, and what we found out when you reverse engineered the actual algorithm that creates the stick figures, so to speak, that's it's trying to make sense out of what it's seeing. So any kind of curve or change in area in a room, or change in temperature causing air density changes, that kind of stuff can create a stick figure. So there are so many variables that cannot be controlled in that situation, that the current use of the SLS doesn't provide any meaningful data.
Okay. And then Dave asked, besides your group reviewing your data, have you submitted publication and peer reviews?
Actually, hey, Dave. We put the papers up on academia.edu, and we actually have a fellow that's he's the chair of the Department of Sociology for Mount St. Mary's University. His name's Dr. Jack Trammell. He's in our organization, and he's going to help us put together these papers and try to get them submitted for peer review in nature journals like Live Science or something like that. And we're trying not to publish them in paranormal journals, because paranormal journals right now, they have a certain, the general science community doesn't like that too much. So what we're trying to do is we're going to try to get these published into the general science journals, so to speak. So.
Okay. And then Claire, to summarize her question, she's just basically asking, how do you call up locations to get your team in to do an investigation?
Well, what we did is we created actual full-on research proposals as if we're writing a grant. Multiple page documents outlining everything from, what we're going to do. Lately, we're having to put in COVID protocols. And we go to these sites because they don't have anybody in them. So we don't have to worry about COVID. So, but we still put together our protocols in those documents. And sometimes some of those research proposal documents can be 20 pages long. It depends on what you're going to be trying to do when you're there. So that's what we do. And sometimes they'll bite. Probably 1 out of 50 will bite. But we've gotten to the point now where we have a good enough reputation where we're able to actually get into a lot of different locations if we need to.
Okay. And then Ronnie wants to know if you use a seismograph.
No, but we do use a geophone, and that's pretty sensitive too for vibration. Um, we do get seismographic data from the U.S. government when we do things. So that's some of the background data that we do collect, and we get we collect data also from NOAA. We collect data from NASA. We collect data from all kinds of different places when we're doing this research. The research we're doing isn't what I showed a presentation on was pretty much focusing on on-site research. We also do a lot of background research too, and we have access to a lot of different databases. So, because of the people that are in our organization, so we reach out to those databases and pull a lot of that data and try to use that data along with the data we collect on site to see if we can make any correlations, looking for causation, kind of thing.
Okay. And then Stephen wants to know if you've used a photon camera, and then later on he also asks, and have you tried long exposure?
We have not used a photon camera yet because it really doesn't meet the need of any of our experiments. A photon camera might need, we might use something like that if the experiment called for it. But right now we haven't used one. And the long exposure, we actually have the president of our organization is a photographer, and he had done some long exposure experiments and gotten some pretty interesting results. Also in the UV, which is pretty interesting. So that's actually setting up an entire line of research that we're going to have to delve into, which is separate from all the other research that we've done. So,
okay. And then Philip wants to know: have you ever found a homeowner that purported? Sorry, I can't speak today. I'm tired.
Purported
paranormal activity that would allow them to do a series of long-term investigations to compare to other properties?
We have found not homeowners. Homeowners are usually, they want to be one and done. If you go back to a place like that, you're being lured. Usually, we found that out the hard way. So you're being lured in because they want exposure, they want the attention. Where we're able to go and reproduce things is at these historical sites where we have built relationships with these organizations. So that's not something you can build overnight either. You got to get their trust. You got to show them that you know what you're doing, that you don't hang dead chickens from the door, you don't walk in with crystals and that kind of thing. That you're gonna do it right, and you're going to make sure that it's that you don't ruin the historical reputation of the property. That's very important.
Okay. And then Craig wants to know what is your opinion of the EDI plus?
Craig, I got to tell you about the EDI plus. The EDI plus is the only off-the-shelf ghost hunting piece of equipment that I would consider using. We actually have 8 of them. And the EDI, because it does temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, it does vibration, and it does EMF. The problem with the EMF, is that it's an average of 3 axes, so you can't tell what axes that the spikes might be on. That's the only problem with that. And it also, the sampling rate on it is kind of slow. All the sensors only sample at 1 sample per second. We found that there's a lot of micro events that happen within those, like within tenths of a second or hundredths of a second. So we found that for an overall basic background data instrument, you know what sensors you've got, how they're calibrated, everything about the instrument. So yes, I am a big fan of the EDI plus for general background information. That's some of the data logging stuff. You can data log with it too. That's the most important part. The only thing I don't like about it is watching people on TV carry them around while they're collecting data. That doesn't work because they have to be static. They have to be sitting still when they're collecting the data, or the sensors are all skewed. Everything is skewed. You can't trust anything you get out of it if you're carrying it around like this. So glad you brought that up.
And do you keep track of atmospheric conditions on each investigation?
Yeah, that's the data we pull from NOAA.
Okay.
At each time we go in and do a research project, we collect data. We pull that data from NOAA. And that goes into our database immediately because we can pull that data faster than we can downloading the audio and the EDI data, all that other stuff.
Okay, and Tim wants to know what states are paranormal related litigation in and what is filed.
Well, basically, I can't give you that information. What I was told by legal friends of mine was that there was litigation in other states. It was basically fraud. It was considered to be fraud. People were taking money and from people and telling them that they had. They would go in and do the investigation, tell them they had a demon. They could get rid of the demon if you give them $500, stuff like that. So that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. I do know that there was a bill. There was a bill in the legislature. I think it might have been Michigan, maybe, where they were. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was a bill where they were trying to get the paranormal investigators listed under private investigators, making them get licensed. And there was some of the here in Virginia, some delegates were actually thinking about the same thing. It never got put forward, but some delegates were actually thinking about the same thing. And it's happened in other places too. So you have to be careful with that, because anybody could tell you that you could go in and tell somebody there's a ghost in their house. And unless you could prove it, if they decide to sue you, you're going to lose, because you're not going to be able to prove it. All you can find are environmental anomalies, and that's all you can find. You can't even say what on the recorder. A lot of these people get these recorders and they get these, what they call EVPs, and they say, well, it's saying I'm here. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What you've got is an audio anomaly, but you can't tell really what it says, because most of us aren't linguists. So at that point, you could get sued because of that. So people are sue happy right now. So I just stay away from it altogether. We do. We just stay away from it. We go in, we call everything's an anomaly, and that's it. And we don't claim any to be able to cleanse a house, because I think that you never want to claim you can do that, because if everything comes back, we've dropped cases before because people wanted us to do things that we just weren't willing to do for the legal purposes. We just did not want to say, we're going to cleanse your head, we can get rid of this stuff. We can't do that. We can only go in and measure the environment and tell you that there's anomalies. That's all we can do. And that's all we ever say we can do.
Okay. And do you test for infrasound?
There was an experiment this group did before I joined, testing, looking at infrasound, but we haven't done a lot of experiments since I've been in here. We spent a lot of time looking at the around what the environmental factors were, other environmental factors that were not on the edge, kind of like infrasound is, because you have ultrasound and you have infrasound, and both of those can make your head do weird things. So we just chose we chose the middle of the road route for this first set of experiments. But I have a feeling that we're going to look at infrasound in the future, and that's where we're going to need funding, because infrasound is not cheap to look at. You can't look at infrasound with your standard recording equipment of any kind.
And does the EDI have one axis?
I'm assuming, Philip, you mean for the well, it averages the three. It's got a triaxial magnetometer in it, but it averages all three axes into one reading. So the problem with that is that if you've got a negative spike on one axis and you got a positive spike on the other axis, and for some reason, it depends on the algorithm, they're going to kind of cancel each other out possibly. That hasn't happened yet, but also on the accelerometer that's the vibration sensor that's also in the EDI is also triaxial, and it also averages the numbers into one number. So, and I got to tell you about the EDI, it's RF shielded, which is a big plus in my book, because we had we found out that there's some interactive activity happening at Bacon's Castle in front of one of the doorways. So we loaded up that doorway with every sensor we had, and one being the EDI for background information. Also had other magnetometers. We had audio recorders, video recorders, stuff like that. They were all battery operated. And then all of a sudden, they all died. Everything died at once, except for that EDI. And we saw on the EDI, there was an electromagnetic pulse. Just blasted that area, and it killed every piece of equipment we had there. And except for the EDI, and it was RF shielded. So that was the only reason that we knew that electromagnetic pulse happened, was because the EDI was there. But, go ahead.
He wants to know if you've ever investigated UFO paranormal areas.
I haven't. But then again, we have people in our organization that have. We have people that have gone to Skinwalker. We have people that have gone to areas. There's an area in North Carolina that's got like a circular area where trees won't grow. They've been there. We had a location here in Virginia that was a UFO hotspot, and they actually investigated these three balls, almost like ball lightning, that passed through a house and left scorch marks on the screen when they passed through the screen. So that happened before my time, though. But they have gone to do those things. We have another couple of folks that are actually researching the dogman phenomena right now, and they travel to all kinds of different hotspots surrounding the dogman phenomena too.
Okay. And then Philip wants to know if you believe in the survival of the human consciousness after death.
I don't know. I think it could happen. I'm a hard science guy, though. I think it could be there. Right now, we have the data that we've got, because I have to follow the data. It's the way I operate. And I have a firm belief that there is a heaven, there is a hell. And, I follow the Christian beliefs along those lines myself. But the data right now is in the interactive side of things, like where something opens the door or something talks to me or what have you. The data is showing more along the lines of an Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is a wormhole, versus a spiritual connection. Now, that's not to say there isn't one, because there have, our entire organization ran into something a long time ago that we aren't allowed to talk about, and could have been considered very spiritual in nature. So that, who's to say? I mean, I myself, I have a Christian belief, heaven and hell. I know exactly what's going on. I like to think that my grandparents are looking at me right now because their pictures are right there. I just can't, I can't say that I know that maybe the consciousness survives after death, except in the form of angels, maybe. Who knows?
Okay, and Donald wants to know, so are residual or non-interactive phenomena paranormal, or are they normal according to your research?
They are, if you look at the literal definition of paranormal, that's outside the normal. So what we consider normal is, you wouldn't hear voices at a clear blue in the clear blue sky. You wouldn't see somebody that you could see through walking through a house or anything like that. So you would have to consider them to be outside the norm or paranormal. The thing you have to consider the most, though, is that in the research that we found that there is a physical cause for that. Now, once we figure out what that physical cause is, what that natural cause is, then once that's figured out, then sociologically you could say that it is now normal. But we don't know that yet. We just know that the data is pointing that direction, that there is a physical natural cause for what's considered residual or non-interactive activity. Dr. Don, thanks for asking that question. Gotta love you.
And then Bob wants to know if you believe in spirits or ghosts, and what are your thoughts on where they reside, different dimension, or just a different time?
Well, as I say, I got to follow the data on this. The data, like I said, the residual data, we've already hammered that into the ground. we've beat that horse, way too much already. But if you talk about the interactive side of things, where maybe you feel like you've been touched, something tugs on your clothes, a door opens, stuff that can actually interact with the environment. Who's to say what those are, because we don't know yet. The data, like the magnetic field jumping and the spike in radiation when those events tend to occur, would seem to indicate that there's some kind of bridge forming, and that there's an environmental change from one side to the other of that bridge. So, basically that's saying whether that's spiritually a spirit or ghost, I can't say that right now. All I can say is that the data is pointing this direction. Now, we may eventually find out that it is spiritual in nature, and believe it or not, I think science can actually contribute to that and find that out for sure. But right now, we can't say that because we don't have anywhere near enough data. We just started collecting data on that.
And Dave wants to know what your thoughts are on using random number generators.
Well, Dave, that kind of, I'm assuming you mean like almost like ITC's type stuff, where they can, where they can the supposed entity could manipulate the random number generator to produce a known result. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, and I have no idea whether that would work or not, because we have found out that a lot of the different techniques used out there statistically are not they're not statistically significant. The results that people are getting are not statistically significant. And if you used a random number generator, you could almost infer that this particular response was generated by, couldn't have been done any other way. But who's to know? I mean, we haven't done any experiments on that. That would require a whole line of experimentation just to look at random number generators to see what was going on. And that would also be interesting because, the stuff that we found in regards to ITC has been nil. So it would be interesting to see if maybe what we're looking at in regards to ITC, maybe we should look at random number generators, or we should look at some other manipulation of a device. There's an example in a dissertation from Stanford from the 1970s, where a guy, it's probably a good thousand or so pages thick, where he was doing computer programming in the 1970s. And he was noticing these weird, a little section of it, he noticed where there was a really odd, reproducible injection of binary code that he could not figure out where it was coming from. And that right there was interesting enough to start people off on the road of possible, ITC type phenomena. And that the white noise thing came into play. A whole bunch of different things came into play after that. So there are little anecdotes here and there throughout history about that kind of thing. But we haven't done anything like that yet.
Okay. And before I continue with the questions, I have a quick question. You had mentioned that you guys really don't use ITC as far as your data. So my question is, does that mean you don't do EVP sessions? Or if you do, how do you analyze that data?
We don't interact.
Okay.
It's that simple. We're trying not to, but because there are all kinds of theories. If you look at quantum theory, as soon as you interact with something, you're going to change it. So we try not to interact with it. Plus, I don't know if you're familiar with John Sable, but he has a really interesting theory about that ghost hunters are kind of hunting themselves. They're being haunted by themselves, because going in and interacting with the environment such as that, you're leaving your own imprint on the environment. So we try not to do that. We're going in trying to collect the data passively. Even if we walk through a location to do equipment check like we do periodically, we're talking among ourselves. And what's really interesting is we get audible anomalies while we're talking among ourselves, instead of actually trying to talk to somebody that's in the room that we can't see. So we don't do that kind of thing.
And Don wants to know if you've ever seen any cryptids.
I have not. However, there are members of our organization that have. Bill Dranganis, I don't know if you all were familiar with him. God rest his soul. He passed away here a couple of years ago. But he was a friend of our organization and had some real interesting experiences with the Bigfoot phenomenon. So, and he had some property out in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia. Go Mountaineers! And he said, and he had some really interesting videos, some thermal imaging type stuff, some audios type stuff. He had a lot of really cool things regarding the Bigfoot type thing. So, but no, I have not seen a cryptid.
Okay. And Ronnie wants to know if you've ever run across anything like a deity.
That is unknown. We've had an experience, our whole organization, where the one I mentioned where we couldn't talk about it. We're not allowed. We're forbidden. So anyway, the beyond that, I have not. Not that I can put my finger on. It could possibly be, but I have no. The data is not saying that at all.
Okay. And then Philip wants to know if you've seen the documentary Calling Earth. It's about ITC.
I have, and the stuff that was brought to light in that documentary, that was during the time where you could do white noise and that kind of thing. We're not able to reproduce any of that, and but then again, we haven't concentrated on just ITC. We're doing it anecdotally as part of another experiment. So maybe if we did, we might be able to reproduce it. But right now, the data that we've collected we cannot see a reproduction of what was brought to light in that documentary.
Okay. And then Bob wants to know, he said that he was during an investigation. He took several photographs and one captured what appears to be a shadow person, even though his naked eye saw nothing. Could it be the speed of the camera that saw it?
It's possible. I mean, I'd have to see the raw picture, and also I'd have to see the environment it was taken in. That's why photographs are really tricky to deal with. We get asked to look at photographs all the time, and the pictures that you see, there's no way you can guarantee that what the person told you is accurate. I'm not saying that what this person just brought up is not accurate, but it's really hard for us to be objective in it. It is really hard because there are so many ways that you could accidentally do something to cause the camera to take a picture that seems like paranormal, but it's not. And we don't know enough about what happened. We weren't there. So we really avoid trying to do photographic analysis unless we were there on the spot. And then we could say definitively what the environment was, what the shutter speed was, what that kind of thing. We can say it all right there, but we try to stay away from that. So,
and Donald wants to know what your thoughts on thermal cameras for research is.
Don, you're hogging the line. I'm just joking. The thermal cameras, I think, in regards to if you're going to look at thermal, well, I just saw something out the corner of my eye. That was weird. If you're looking, if you're going to look for that if you're looking for temperature changes in the environment, thermal imaging is very valuable. It is very valuable. But if you're just going to shotgun it and point it around and look at stuff, you're going to see a lot of things. You also have to know how to use one of those. Most people that have them don't know how to use them. I went through a lot of training in the chemical industry on how to use one of those, and you can really skew your results by using it incorrectly. But I think it'd be invaluable if you're looking for temperature changes in the environment.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to a couple more questions. If anyone has any questions, we still have about 30 minutes. Feel free to ask. But some questions I wrote down during the presentation where how do you suggest someone who's new to the field or wanting to use the scientific method start researching and learning more about how to use the process?
Well, I mean, I would, first off, you need to know exactly what the scientific method is. And the first place to go is Google scientific method. There are a gazillion videos out there. Some of the videos, if you find videos from places like Johns Hopkins or Tulane or Pitt or one of these major universities, and those right there, they go through a lot of, and the videos tend to be longer and more in depth, and you learn a lot more about it. There's also a lot of books on the subject, on the scientific method and experimental design. Learn as much as you can about it first, and then see if you can find an organization that might be willing to let you tag along and see if you can apply what you've learned. Because it's always best to apply what you've learned in a practice environment before you go out and do it in real life. That's a basic training precept. I'm a trainer for the Department of Health too. So that's a basic training precept. You learn it, you learn the basics of it, and then you apply it in your training, which is like in a practice run. And then you can go out and actually perform the work. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. And then do you have any examples of like practice tests people can do? Because like when people ask me about how to use the scientific method, I tell them to get an Eddy Plus and maybe set it in the same spot the same day for 30 days and track everything from weather to atmospheric pressures, and then also compare that then to it just so they can get practice using the data logging. Are there any other tips that you can offer?
Yeah, I would do that. I mean, always get a practice run with whatever piece of equipment you're planning to use based on your experiment. Like with the Geiger counter stuff, I stuck my Geiger counter in my sunroom, my first Geiger counter in my sunroom for 18 hours, and collected the data just to see what the background would look like. It's always good to have that background data so you know what it's going to look like when everything is flat, when everything is constant. And then you can also see when your air conditioner kicks on or kicks off and that kind of thing too. So you can actually get some really good practice in seeing what the environment's supposed to look like versus what an anomaly looks like. So, and that's a very good idea. Just go ahead and practice with whatever gear you're going to use.
Yeah, because when I did it, I was doing an experiment where like how the moon phases affects paranormal research and the atmospheric data. So it's kind of like I logged the moon phase and everything along with the other data, just to get practice and to keep track.
That's right. And start looking for, the weather. I got to tell you, historical weather data is really easy to get. Go to Weather Underground and you can get historical weather data like that. You don't have to dig it out of NOAA, because if you go to NOAA, you're going to have to dig it out. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and for those that are not database savvy, that's no fun. But the Weather Underground, it's easy. Boom. Pull up historical data for a certain date, it's there. So weather data, and you get the phases of the moon too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I use pre and post investigation.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there anywhere that you know off the top of your head where people can see sample research or experiments that they can do?
Well, I mean, you could, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Our stuff's all over our Facebook page. We talk about our experiments and that kind of thing on our Facebook page. So you could go there at the VACPRI on Facebook. But you can see a lot of stuff there. If you have any questions about it, you could ping through the Facebook page, and one of us will get back in touch with you. Probably the subject matter expert in the area that you're looking at will get back in touch with you. Because we have 30 of us, and we have electromagnetic engineer from the Navy. We have a NASA data analyst. We have the sociologist I told you about earlier. There's me, I'm a chemist. We have other electrical engineers, medical professionals. We may even farm you off to Dr. Don, who's been on here twice already, hogging the line. No, I'm joking, Don. So.
And then, do you suggest any programs for analyzing data?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's several. What I would do if you're looking for anomalies, I would get something like Jump as a statistics type package. Prism is actually better than Jump. Jump is kind of um, it's a little clunky sometimes. Prism's a lot better. I like Prism. We're actually in the middle of doing R because we're actually writing code to look for anomalies buried in the noise on some of these data loggers. And R though, I don't. That's hard. That's hard stuff there. You got to know what you're doing, which is why we have programmers in our group too. So we you got to know what you're doing with R. But I would recommend Prism or Jump. Jump is a good uh, an easy one for people. There's also one from the University of Texas called KST. It's free. You can look up KST online, and you can do you can graphically represent just about anything you have. Look for look for your power numbers, everything. Do all the statistical analysis you need in KST. But the easiest one is Jump. Prism has a lot more power to it, but yeah, I would say get Jump if you can.
Okay, and I agree with you that in the field the sharing is an issue, but are there any openly available databases for people who want to start doing scientific data, can compare
Well, they
Jump
can.
data?
I know that the Division of Perceptual Studies has a full library at the University of Virginia, but it's not online. Therein lies the problem. I've been there and I've looked through it, and the sheer amount of information there is staggering. I mean, you really you need to target. You can't go in there and just shotgun the approach. You're going to have to target what you're looking for when you go in someplace like that. I mean, our database, if you're interested in anything in particular, just contact us, and we can make parts of our database shareable so that you can look at it's the text database, and then also it references the actual data logger data and audio and video and stuff too on a really big server, a 3 terabyte server. So yeah, so you could do that too if you want to. But Division of Perceptual Studies, definitely. The Rhine Institute, that's another place. ASSAP, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. There you go. I got it. I'm a member, and I never can remember that. But they're from the UK, and they're the only government-funded paranormal organization in the world. They're funded by the government, so supported by the government, not necessarily funded, but supported by the government. So yeah, they have a lot of scientific papers published out there that you have access to when you go to their website. So there's some really good places too.
Okay, and Ronnie wants to know if a geometric field can alter one's perception on the surroundings, and that would make them see and hear things that are really not there.
It depends on the strength of it and your sensitivity to it. Electromagnetic field between around 60 hertz is typically between 60 and 100 hertz is known to do stuff like that to people that are sensitive at certain levels. We have the geomagnetic field. I'm not sure that could do that. But then again, there would have to be a study done to see, because the geomagnetic field just is not that strong. The electromagnetic fields that we see tend to be more along the lines of anywhere 10 milligauss to a full Gauss, and that's pretty high. A geomagnetic field, you're talking about micro Gauss or smaller kind of changes. So I'm not sure that would happen or not. However, you guys also interviewed, had Brandon Masillo do a presentation, and he's got some real interesting theories along the lines of geomagnetic fields and the magnetic fields around the brain as well. So you might want to check with him about that too, because that's kind of out of my line of expertise right now.
Philip wants to know, what locations have you gotten the most consistent anomalies?
Bacon's Castle. Consistent in amount and consistent in type. That's why we go there so often, and we're able to conduct those experiments and get our reproducible data because of that. I would say the next one, Maybe Scotchtown, which is Patrick Henry's house here in Ashland. And if Steve Dills is on here, he knows exactly where that is. They have some consistent activity there too, but nowhere near what they have at Bacon's Castle. Bacon's Castle, you can almost you know when you walk in something's going to happen every single time. So.
Okay. That looks like that's all of our questions. Is there anything, if anyone still has any questions, please get them in quickly. We only have a few more minutes left. And Steve did respond. He says, I'm here and it's one of my favorite spots.
Yeah, that one and Hanover Tavern.
But while we wait to see if any more questions come in real quick, if you guys missed today's presentation, make sure to follow us on Facebook at Ghost Education 101 so that way you can be notified of our upcoming presentations. And you can also watch the replay within the next 24 to 48 hours. It'll be up on YouTube under Ghost Education 101. And real quick, our next presentation is going to be on April 14th. And Robert's going to be joining us again. He's going to discuss how to select equipment for your paranormal investigation. Ann and Renato will also be joining us to show you and demonstrate how to use a spirit box. I will be joining and showing a non-tech tool that I love to use on investigations. And Philip will also be joining us as well. And then later in, I think it's later April or May, Philip will also be doing a demonstration on how to water scrying and how he uses that process for investigations and research. And let me see if there's any more questions. Oh, no more questions. Do you have anything else that you want to say before we go?
No, you touched on one thing. You don't have to have a piece of equipment to go out and research the paranormal. Your eyes and your ears are all you really need. Maybe a notepad. So.
Exactly. Let me, oops, there we go. Okay. Well, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you one more time?
Yeah, you can find us. Can I share my screen again? I can share it real quick. And right there it is.
Okay.
You can find, that's the email address and our phone number for our organization. There's our website and there's our Facebook page. And if you have any questions, you can always just reach out to through one of those avenues, and we're glad to take your question, and we'll get back to you with a response as soon as we can.
Okay, and I know Philip has another question he threw in here real quick, and it is barometric pressure drops when activity happens. How often does that happen?
What we're finding is that it can happen with interactive activity. We actually saw it. We were just at the John Marshall House in Richmond. He was the house built for the John Marshall Supreme Court Justice, built in 1790. We were in there, and we've got negative temperature, dips in temperature and dips in barometric pressure, while one of the teams that was going around and checking equipment were talking among themselves about the history of the building and the difference in federalism and other political type things. And all of a sudden, these negative spikes started happening. So it does happen. But at the same time, we probably get as many positive barometric pressure spikes as we do negative ones too. So, if there is a bridge, and let's say there's an environment on this side of it versus an environment on this side of it. If this environment over here is hot and that bridge opens, then the temperature is going to spike over here, and vice versa, that kind of thing. So who knows? Maybe that's what's going on. But that's just supposition on my part because we don't have enough data to talk about that yet.
Okay. And a few more things popped up before we go, since we still have time. Any books that you recommend?
Books. In regards to doing this kind of research, well, I tell you, Brandon Masulo's book, The Ghost Studies, is a really good book. I would look at that one right off the top of my head before you get started in anything, because it makes you think. It's one of those critical thinking type books. John Sable has several books out as well. Look for him in Amazon under John Sable. He has literally 51 books out there, but he looks at it from an archaeological perspective. So that's another really good book to look at. And he looks at it scientifically as well. So I would definitely look at those two books, well, those two authors. Let me put it that way.
Okay. Donald has a question. He wants to know what your thoughts of the value of the full spectrum cameras for research.
Well, Don, a full spectrum camera is great if it's really a full spectrum camera. One thing that a lot of when they sell you when a lot of these ghost hunting organizations that sell equipment, when they build a full spectrum camera, they try to remove the filters in there for UV and for infrared. And the problem is, if the lens is still glass, it's still going to filter out a large portion of the UV. So you're not getting really the true UV experience. Now, if you get one that really is a full spectrum camera with like a polycarbonate type lens, then it'd be interesting to see the pictures that come out of that. What you want to do though is you want to have a picture in visible light at the same time as you get a picture in the full spectrum, so you can compare the two. Just taking one with a full spectrum, you end up in the same boat as any other camera, because you can't really tell. There's too many variables where the picture could really be natural, and it just looks funky. So yeah, I'd have two cameras there. If you take a picture if you're taking pictures with a full spectrum, take one with a visible light camera too, so you can compare the two. If you can do it at the same time, that'd be even better. They make actually the photography folks do have a handheld device where you can have one camera here and one camera here, so you have a stereo camera effect. So you could do something like that and just trigger both of them at the same time and take the pictures both ways.
Okay, I think that's it for our questions. Okay, again, thank you everyone for joining us. Here's the information if you want to contact and learn more about the scientific method or have any of your questions answered. And make sure to follow us on Ghost Education 101. Our replay will be up on YouTube within the next 2 days. And I want to thank you again for joining us. This was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks, Heather. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. We'll see you guys next time.